All right, welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are going to tackle a concept that's, right at the heart of how cryptocurrencies evolve and sometimes how they completely fall apart. We're talking about the blockchain fork.
So, let's start with a simple idea. Think of a blockchain as like a shared story that everyone agrees on. It's this digital history book, right? A ledger where every single person on the network agrees on every single transaction that's ever been recorded. It's supposed to be one single unified truth.
But what happens when people stop agreeing? Yeah, that one little question, it throws us right into the messy, fascinating, and honestly super important world of blockchain forks. So let's get into it. What happens when that consensus just breaks? You see, a fork doesn't really start with a line of code. It starts with people. It starts with a fundamental disagreement about what the future of the network should even look like. It's a battle of ideas, a real conflict of vision.
And this quote really gets to the heart of it. It's a debate about the very soul of a cryptocurrency. So, what's more important? Should it be like digital gold, super secure, totally decentralized, but maybe kind of slow? Or should it be like digital cash? Fast, cheap, easy to use for your morning coffee, even if you have to make some trade-offs. This one question, this ideological rift, has literally caused some of the biggest splits in crypto history. And believe me, this wasn't some quick disagreement. This conflict, which people started calling the scaling wars, simmered for years in the Bitcoin community. You had all of these different groups, all these different factions, pushing their own ideas for how to solve the network's growing pains. And it led to years of intense debate and, eventually a massive split.
And let's be clear, we're not talking about polite academic debates here. Oh no. These were passionate, sometimes really hostile arguments. You had real people, huge amounts of money on the line, and all sorts of accusations of greed and self-interest flying around. It just goes to show you, these disagreements are deeply, deeply human. Okay, so what happens when a community finally hits that breaking point? Well, the network itself can actually split in two, but not all splits are created equal. They kind of come in different flavors, and this brings us to the really crucial difference between what we call a soft fork and a hard fork.
So at its most basic level, a fork is just a change to the blockchain's rules, its protocol. It's that exact moment where that single shared story we talked about diverges. It splits, creating two potential paths forward, two possible versions of history. Now, the key thing to remember here, the absolute most important difference, is backward compatibility. Think of a soft fork like a software update on your phone. The new apps still work with the old system, right? Everyone's still on the same page, mostly. But a hard fork? That's a radical break. It's like creating a whole new operating system that's completely incompatible with the old one. You get two separate chains, and they can't talk to each other anymore. Ever. And this table here kind of breaks down the mechanics of how this all works. With a soft fork, you're making the rules stricter. It's like adding a new security feature. As long as most people agree to follow this new, tighter rule, the chain stays together. But with a hard fork, you're either loosening the rules, like allowing bigger blocks, or creating brand new conflicting rules. That's a fundamental change. And if you don't upgrade, you're not part of the new network. You're left behind on a totally separate chain.
Okay, so this all sounds very technical, but what does it actually mean for you, for the users? And more importantly, what happens to your money when one of these permanent splits happens? Well, let's look at two of the most famous hard forks. They happen for completely different reasons. You had Ethereum, which forked to reverse this massive $50 million hack. It was a moral debate, right? Do we undo a huge injustice? Then you have Bitcoin Cash, which, as we've seen, was the big finale to that long, drawn-out philosophical fight over speed versus security.
Right. This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? If the chain splits, what happens to my coins? And the answer is actually one of the wildest, most interesting parts of this whole process.
So let's take the Bitcoin Cash fork as our example. Picture this. It's August 1st, 2017, the moment of the split. Let's say you owned exactly one Bitcoin on the original chain.
Then, poof, the instant the fork happened, you also owned one Bitcoin Cash on the brand new chain. Why? Because the new chain is an exact copy of the old one right up until that moment of the split. So your balance gets duplicated. Just like that, you own coins on both chains.
But here's the thing. Forks are way more than just a weird way to get new coins. They're absolutely fundamental to understanding how power actually works in a decentralized world.
This idea of user sovereignty is everything. In a system like this, there's no CEO, no board of directors, no single group. Not the developers, not the miners, not the big companies can force changes on everybody. At the end of the day, it's the users, people like you and me, who decide which rules to follow and which chain is actually worth something.
So you can start to see why some people say forks are a feature, not a bug. They're like this ultimate escape hatch. If a part of the community really can't stand the direction things are heading, they aren't stuck. They can just leave. They can fork the code and build their own version of the network with their own rules. It's governance by exit. It's messy, for sure, but it's an incredibly powerful tool.
And that brings us back to the central tension, the big trade-off that drives almost all of these heated debates. It all comes down to this. Do you prioritize decentralization and security above all else, even if it's slow? Or do you prioritize scalability and speed to get more people using it, even if that means making a few compromises? This is the fundamental question.
Okay, so let's wrap this all up. What are the key things to remember? First, forks happen because people, humans, disagree on the rules. Second, you've got soft forks, which are like simple backward-compatible upgrades, and then you have hard forks, which are permanent splits that create whole new cryptocurrencies. And finally, and maybe most importantly, forks are this powerful, if a bit chaotic, form of decentralized governance. They're the reason these systems can survive without a boss.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Are these forks a sign of chaos and weakness? Or are they the ultimate expression of freedom in a decentralized world? Are they the very feature that makes these networks so incredibly resilient and powerful in the first place? Something to chew on.